So today we're going to talk about the epic legends of classical Greece and Rome, and I'm going to explain to you how they're talking about the ancient war that we've talked about many times on this channel. So they're just describing the same battle as Ragnarok, the Amarna tablets. So let's get into it. The legends of Greece and Rome appear to have been based on genuine historical figures and actual events. These classical heroes are flesh and blood characters from our ancestral past. We will uncover the Indo-European origins of the mysterious Hyksos. A Pleiadian princess from mainland Greece is identified with one of Egypt's greatest queens. Agamemnon's Trojan War is set in its proper archaeological context. Homer's Iliad is finally given an epic historical setting. The Pleiadians were the ancestral people of all European peoples. They lived mostly in the North Aegean, and they preserved a common non-Greek language. The Greeks used the name to describe the original pre-Greek inhabitants of Greece and the Aegean area, with whom they sometimes included the Etruscans. See, the ancient Greeks were called Pleiadians, and I connect this with the Pleiadians of the star cluster, the Seven Sisters. So, in my eyes, that these were the ancient gods, these were the ancient astronauts, if you like, that was battling the Anunnaki, which were the Egyptians. In the Pleiadian creation myth, it talks about the goddess of all things. She spontaneously generates the serpent who mates with her. She lays the cosmic egg and bids the serpent to incubate it by coiling 7 times around it until it splits in two and hatches all things that exist. In the soil of Arcadia, the Pleiadians would spring up from the serpent's teeth, scattered under the heel of the goddess of all things, who kicked the serpent from their home on Mount Olympus. So is Mount Olympus somewhere that's not on this earth? Both being ancient civilizations, the Armenians and Greeks have coexisted for centuries. There are ancient notes by Greek historians suggesting of the roots of Armenians. The earliest reference to Armenia was made by a Greek historian in 525 BC. According to a hypothesis proposed by linguists during the 20th century, the Armenian and Greek languages share a common ancestor. This has led to the proposal of the Greco-Armenian language, postdating the Proto-Indo-European language. Herodotus suggests that the Armenians are descendants of the Pleiadians. Plato had earlier noticed the similarities between the Greek and Pleiadian languages. Pleiadian, it just sounds like Pleiadians again. The Armenians' homeland, before their migration, was a valley in Thessaly, after which they are named. A chain of ancient references show a close relation between the two peoples. A team from the Institute of Science of Human History in Germany analysed the DNA of 93 Egyptian mummies dating from approximately 1400 BCE to 400 CE. The evidence for their study reveals a surprisingly close relation to ancient people of the Near East, such as Armenians. Ancient people believed that mankind evolved in Armenia, built a high civilization, but was destroyed by a great flood, after which the remnants spread to all directions. The Holy Bible places the Garden of Eden in Armenia, and the genesis of human races around the Mount Ararat, upon which landed Noah's Ark, but probably the greatest contribution of the Armenian highlanders to mankind has been the creation of alphabetic writing. It was this revolutionary concept of script which was destined to become the foundation for which all ancient and modern alphabets evolved. Prominent scholars agree that the alphabet was invented by the historic Hyksos people during their domination of the Near East between the 18th and 16th centuries before Christ. But who were these enigmatic Hyksos? Around 1900 BC, a group of these Armenian tribesmen burst out of their homeland and carved out a powerful empire encompassing Syria, Palestine and Egypt. Known to the classical Greeks as Hyksos, They ruled over Egypt for 150 years, from 1730 BC until their expulsion by a resurgent Egypt in 1580 BC. The Hyksos introduced the horse and the spoked-wheeled chariot, bronze and Iron Age weapons and hardware, scale armour and war helmet, the composite bow, a complete calendar, and the building of walled cities fortified by moats. They brought to Egypt improved methods of spinning and weaving, new musical instruments, the humpback bull, the olive and the pomegranate trees. As a ruling aristocracy, they supplanted feudalism over the democratic patriarchal system of the Semitic tribes and introduced the one universal sun god. The Hyksos founded Jerusalem, the holy city. The sub-Saharan African genetic influx seems to have only started after the Roman period, which coincides with the advent of monotheism, in particular Islam. Hence why modern Egyptians are more genetically shifted towards African people than the ancient Egyptians. The most typical skeletons of the white race have been found in the Caucasus, after which this race is called Caucasian. This indicates that the Armenian and Georgian mountains of the Caucasus were the birthland of the white race. The first group of Indo-European migrants arrived in the Levant at the beginning of the Middle Bronze Age. Their distinctive houses, graves and personal ornaments indicating an origin in Anatolia. These elite settlers, although a minority, took over the rule of the early Bronze Age cities, especially the coastal ports, and grew welfare through maritime trade. Eventually their descendants occupied Egypt as the Hyksos, ruling over the local Canaanite population, which arrived at the Avaris in the century following the departure of the Proto-Israelites from that city towards the end of the 13th dynasty. According to Josephus, the Bible Hebrews were in reality the Hyksos, which, as translated by modern Egyptologists, mean foreign kings. Something to note here is the English alphabet is the most similar graphically to the ancient Hebrew alphabet out of all alphabets today, including Jewish square script Hebrew, mainly because the 10 lost tribes of Israel settled in Western nations via Europe after their exile in Assyria. The Hyksos were subdued and were indeed driven out of other parts of Egypt, but were shut up in a place that contained 10,000 acres. This place was named Avaris, which the shepherds built a wall around all this place, which was a large and strong wall, and this in order to keep all their possessions and their prey within the place of strength. But Moses made an attempt to take them by force and by siege, with 480,000 men to lie row-tongue about them. But upon his despair of taking the place of siege, they came to a composition with them, that they should leave Egypt and go without any harm to be done to them. So basically the Hyksos surrendered. They was obviously surrounded by this large army. They surrendered and they come to an agreement that they'd let them go free. That's what this is describing. And obviously the town with the large wall, this is Jerusalem. Apophis, Hyksos king of ancient Egypt, who initially controlled much of Egypt, but was driven back northward to the vicinity of his capital in the Nile River Delta by the successive attacks by the Theban pharaohs. This means that Apophis became king of Egypt in virtually the same year as the Pharaoh eruption in the Aegean, which is dated 1628 BC. We're going to talk more about this Pharaoh eruption. I think this is when the nuclear war happened at the time of this Pharaoh eruption. From this dating, the Hyksos were far from being the ancestors of the biblical Jews. They are way too early, having ruled over 200 years before Abram. Archaeology has revealed that the Hyksos invaded Egypt from Palestine and were composed of various foreign peoples who were not related to the Egyptians, Babylonians or Assyrians. Greek mythology offers the best explanation for the identity of the Hyksos in that they were Greeks and people who dwelled on the Black Sea coast who migrated to Egypt at the time of the abduction of Lau by Zeus, which occurred in about 1675 BC. The Epirus, who are mentioned in Egyptian inscriptions, were characterized as bandits who rode on horses and drove chariots. The historical evidence for a Greek empire, which covered the Mediterranean, lies in the account of the Empire of Atlantis that was given to Solon by the Egyptian priest of Neith shortly before his death in 559 BC, and the account of the abduction of Lau and her marriage to the king of Egypt. This story of Atlantis, later referred to by Plato, quoting Socrates, is as follows. 9,000 years before Solon, the Atlanteans, so called after their first king Atlas, ruled over all of Europe as far as the Pillars of Hercules, including all of Asia Minor, Palestine and Africa, except for Egypt, from their island in the Aegean Sea, known to them as Atlantic. So this describes the Anunnaki, that they controlled the whole of Europe and all of the world really. The Atlanteans were expelled from all of Europe by the Athenians and forced to flee to Egypt. The Athenians' victory did not last long, since shortly afterwards the greatest volcanic eruption in the last 15,000 years destroyed their home, the island of Thera in the Pleiades, and almost wiped out the Proto-Greek civilization in 1628 BC. Egypt then recovered its kingdom. The eruption, I think, was the nuclear war that happened. Putting the dates together, we have a date of between 1695 to 1675 BC for the expulsion of the Atlanteans from Europe, which corresponds to the start of the reign of the Hyksos. The term Atlanteans come from Atlas, their first king. When Solon wrote the account down, he re-Hellenized the name Hyksos to Atlas, as Plato explains in his text. The Atlantean rule over Egypt came to an end in about 1550 BC, give or take 60 years, which corresponds to the reign over Amos, who ruled jointly over Egypt from 1551 BC. This account is also backed up by the Greek king list, which placed the first man at this time Amadin, the father of Car and Lydus, during whose time there was an 18-year-long famine referred to by Herodotus in the first book of his histories. This famine would have been caused by the so-called nuclear winter resulting from the Thera eruption. Prior to this event, all Greek records were assumed to be destroyed. The Hyksos invasion indicates that the inhabitants of Palestine during this period were Europeans, as does the story of Noah, whose flood occurred at the same time as the Thera eruption. According to the biblical account, the son of Noah was an ancestor of all the Greeks and the Thracians. Noah's son Ham was the ancestors of all the Hittites, and Noah's son Shem was the ancestors of all the Lydians, all of whom are European peoples. This European origin has been demonstrated by modern analysts of Y chromosome DNA, which shows that the M172 DNA lineage, which originated in Anatolia, was also the dominant lineage of Minoan Greece, Phoenicia, and after that, the M35 lineage, which originated in Egypt. The DNA lineage of the modern Jew is predominantly M89, the same as that of the Arabs. So let's now consider another candidate for who the Jews were. The goddess Isis appeared in his sleep and blamed him that her temple had been demolished in the war. But the sacred scribe said to him that if he would purge Egypt of the men who had pollutions upon them, he should be no longer troubled with such frightful apparitions. He accordingly chose out 250,000 that were thus diseased and cast them out. Moses, wishing to secure the future of his authority over the nation, gave them a noble form of worship, opposed to all that is practiced by other men. In their holy place they have consecrated an image of the animal by whose guidance they found deliverance from their long and thirsty wanderings. But this text by Tacitus, if you read it halfway through, it describes they abstained from swine's flesh in consideration of what they suffered when they were infected by leprosy, to which this animal is liable. So this is why they still don't eat pork, because it reminds them of when they was cast out of Egypt. According to the Bible, when David captured the city of Jerusalem, he expelled all the lepers from it, and all the people who were deformed or diseased. This tallies with the account of Manetho, who says that Avaris was set up by the Egyptians as a leper colony, just prior to the Exodus. Even at the time of Christ, the Bible says Jerusalem was full of lepers and the sick. The whole story about the people being sick and leprous most probably originated as an allegory for the destruction of the people of Avaris, being unclean and unlawful, meaning that they were criminals. In the Middle Ages, the people most likely to become lepers were prisoners kept in dungeons. Since the Apiru are described as bandits in Egyptian records, this explains the origin of the Bible story about the Egyptians giving their gold to the so-called Hebrews on the day of the Exodus. In reality, the Apiru stole it. Manetho's account clearly distinguishes the current occupants of Avaris, i.e. the lepers, from the previous occupants, the Hyksos, as separate peoples. The Manetho stele also distinguishes the people of Israel as the Apiru, as different peoples, whereas the Bible says that the Hebrews and Israelites were the same people. So was that changed to encompass all these people? Why did they change the story?